Hey.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Yes, yes I can.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Me and my shitty internet are here for you. Let's do this.
Sweet.
Uh, I'm surprised it's been giving me such a hassle with Discord lately. It's weird.
Yeah, that sucks. It's always a I don't know. There's always something, right? There's always some
Right.
complication.
But it's just like with work and VPNing and the Vassal and like anything else, it's totally fine. But with Discord, it's like we're gonna be iffy at best. It's Comcastic.
Yeah, that sucks. I wonder what the issue is. Other than I guess just Comcast blowing.
Yeah. Or I mean, maybe it's Discord. Maybe I need to. I don't know. Maybe it's salted. I haven't updated in a while. I don't know.
Maybe so.
Anyway, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing
Mic
very good, doing
off.
very good. I got some hurried airbrushing done because I got a buddy of mine hooked on
Mic on.
navs, and so today the launch party kit came in, so I could get him Angel and Siren along with the rest of the guild primed.
Oh,
One
sick.
one more for the mind virus, man. I'm infecting a lot of folks.
That's really
Great.
awesome. That's really cool. I'm kind of jealous. I wish. I mean, there's a lot of things preventing me from having a super active local scene right now, but I wish I had something like that. That would be great.
So far, the quote local is, it's on the internet, so they could be in,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
China for
Yeah.
all I care. But someday, whenever we can hang out in person again, my goal was to like eliminate all the barriers to entry for a new miniatures game.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's just like, hey, if I can fork you over a ready to be painted or painted guild, like I will more than likely have players for this good game, as opposed to like, well, the game's good, but I'd have to like
Mic
find the
off.
pieces and it's not supported, and then I'd have to paint them, and it's like, no, let's just play, let's go.
Mic
Smart.
on.
Yeah. That's amazing. Hopefully.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, um, there are a couple more majors and one or two minors that I think I know, so we could bang those out, or we could start on something that I have absolutely no idea on that would be time consuming. Because it's the top of the one of these sessions. I don't know what you think is the best. And I had one or two generic how to plays that came up after I was thinking about the last session that I think I don't really know what I'm doing with. The first is how do I make a decision about whether to kick or receive, other than like, do I want the momentum or not?
Mhm.
And the second is how do I think about the turn bridge and who to jail, and or how to jail? Because I'm aware of the concept and I know it's powerful, but it basically isn't something that I can reliably set up or play around. And I think
Mhm.
that because we've been playing, I'm inexperienced, all my opponents are inexperienced, like we haven't
Right.
really executed that properly yet.
Mhm. Um. I guess I mean those all sound like fun things to talk about, and I'm sure I could spend too much time talking about any of those topics. But I think. Is there something specific that you're really excited to talk about? Because this is ultimately for you. I'd rather just let enthusiasm guide us.
Oh, sure. Well, I got nabs on the brain, so let's start there
Okay,
because
cool.
I think that like it's pretty straightforward, minus just like learning how to execute and the nuances of each matchup, which is going to be too in depth for this kind of thing. But uh, I think that what I want to know is when do you play Angel and Siren, and what are you looking to get from them?
Mhm.
But just like last time, my take on the guild is that Windfinder is kind of an all-rounder, in that she can be useful in a fight, in that she can kind of stop it because I think that most of the time the Navs don't want to be fighting. She can also do the bounce off a model thing with her mobility.
Mhm.
Her legendary lets you get out of a bad situation you put yourself in, or avoid the bad situation entirely, or set up a bad situation for your opponent. But I think that's the least likely. I think Wander, the way that I've seen Wander played is like give one influence, guide once early, and then try to be an asshole and get anchored, like get the his version of loved creature to
Yeah,
happen, but
about
he
their
doesn't really
necks.
do
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, about their necks. And then Fathom is ridiculous. Like Fathom is a total all-star, holy shit mobility, can get anywhere for no reason. Multiple viable dodges. Um, Ebb the one with the power armor? Yeah. Okay. Ebb
Yes.
has the old ways or whatever. I think Ebb's job is to be in the way and provide the aura if necessary and do his thing, but also not just be free points for the opposing team.
Mhm.
And then Horizon is like supposed to die, I think, and then respawn on their side and like be a either snapshot turret or an unexpected arrival uh turret, for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better term, and then just kind of make that side of the pitch not a terrible place to be because that's where you're going to be living most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the absolute all-star of the entire team, outside of, I guess, Fathom, but I think it's Azimuth. Like Azimuth is just a house of pain. He's ridiculous. He is the kind of like uh minor guild all-star where you put the power in the models that can't play up. And I think that he's very clearly the piece that is so insane that you want to play the guild. And I think that on any other team, he would be super unfair. And I think that between Windfinder's passive Stormwind and Azimuth's being able to net it a billion times, like it's on the playbook and you can buy it,
Yep.
I think that that's why their tokens come with knockdowns. I think that they are just like knockdown crazy, almost more than the Brewers. They don't really want to knock you down to like come and scrum with you. They want to knock you down so you aren't threatening parting blows and you aren't able to like unless you have momentum, you aren't able to stand up and come tackle or something like that. And speaking of tackles, I think Azimuth, if you can't score, your goal is to give the ball to Azimuth because attacking him is a fucking nightmare. Like his defenses go insane, his counterattack is going to net you or knock you down. And even if you do hit him on his sixes, he has close control.
Mm-hmm. I think pretty much all of that was right. I should say this is a fortuitous time to ask me about Navigators, because I am playing Navigators in the tournament that I'm currently in, and
Oh, awesome.
this probably before this past month, I think I you could count my Navigators games of any kind, tournament or casual, on one hand. But now I've played them a fair amount and thought about them a lot, and there also is another good time. Another reason it's a good time to talk about Navigators and why I'm playing them is because when they were released, and for a long time after they were released, they were almost certainly the worst or one of the worst guilds in the game, in terms of competitive viability.
Mhm.
But I now think they're one of the strongest. They've been buffed several times in the last few edits of the game before Steamforge left,
Mhm.
to buy cigarettes, and
They'll be back. They'll be back.
yeah, um, and
They left the door open for season five, man. It said so in the blog post. If it wasn't for the players, like it's not you that we broke up with. It's our kids. Like it's not the relationship was working. I just hate our kids. There we go.
yeah, that's exactly right. But they're in a spot right now where I think they're one of the best guilds in the game, and they're a lot more flexible, I think, than they used to be, and also than their kind of pitch sells them as. I think you can plausibly play them as a mixed guild, and I actually think that's their best strength is going 2-2, 2 goals, 2 takeouts.
So they're the 2-2 to the fishes, well the non-Corsair fishes 3-0.
Yeah, I think so. I think you certainly could win games going 3-0 with these guys, and I think occasionally against a sort of easier to kill team, you would even go 4-1 with them. But I think they settle nicely into
Wow.
2-2. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I think that it's sort of a quirk of their dice mechanic, the precise calculations thing that
Yeah,
all of
the
them.
Yahtzee reroll.
Right.
Yeah.
They it's they're now very good at piling on extra dice and dealing with armor because Eb's passive aura is kind of nuts, and Sprung a Leak is nice too if
And
you're.
yeah, they upped Spring a Leak to 2,
Yeah,
which means that basically like even the Masons or Blacksmiths just have shit defense because they have 0 armor.
yeah, exactly, and even the
Oh,
most.
speaking of, if I give you negative armor, is that the same as giving you -2 defense where I get an additional die? I think no. I think you
No,
just have.
no,
Okay, great.
there's no benefit to going below 0 armor. There's no effect of that. But yeah, so I think in general, I think your characterizations of the models is correct. Azimuth is absolutely bonkers, and I would say Ebb and Fathom are like right behind him, both.
Mhm.
Ebb doesn't always do a ton literally on his activation, but the presence, like I think, how well do you know Longshanks, the website that
I,
like.
I know it very well because it is the only site that still exists that has a depth of information. I use Pitch Planner every time I set up a game. I read the statistics, kind of like I pay less attention to them now that there isn't a scene, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
But I like looking at the captain breakdowns to see what people are doing. But like, if there is a place to see lists, or if there's a place to see more than Tales from the Pitches take on various strategy articles or whatever, I'm open. But they also have a cool section of links. Like that's how I find a lot of the harder to find, like less SEO optimized YouTube channels and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'm just asking because I think that if you just spent like 10 minutes sometime trying to come up with like different circumstances. Like I guess open the Nav's cards, take a look at say somebody who would be making attacks, so like Azimuth or Windfinder, and then fuck around with the dice math calculator with the Navigator's dice on and see
Yeah,
the
you check the bottom and you get to do the navs mode. I
yeah
like you get to like 99 most of the time. Like it's wild how close to guaranteed some of these hits are.
yeah. Not only that, but I think taking a look at the difference between one armor and zero armor on pretty common defense like lineups will make it clear how strong Ebb is because there's like armor used to be very punishing for navigators because navigators will do anything they are legally allowed to do, but armor reduces the things that are legally
Right.
allowed, right?
Like if you look at TAC 4, like if I'm going up against an armor 2 model without anything, like if Ebb didn't have an anti-armor rule, he literally can't get momentum. He
Yeah,
will reliably always spring a leak or grasping earth, but like he cannot take a momentous result.
yeah, exactly. And so Ebb basically walks around sort of this is a stupid pun, but expanding the horizons of the Navs Guild, like
Love it. Let's go. I'm all for
making
it.
making things that were not previously possible not possible, and when they are possible, the navigators make them trivial. So I think that this like Ebb, Fathom, and Wind, or I'm sorry, Ebb, Azimuth, and Windfinder are a very strong fighting core, and while other more fighting dedicated teams can put together a list of 6 that is better at fighting than those 3, it's pretty hard to put together a set of 3 that's better fighting than those 3, or at least like very meaningfully better. So the way I've played the guild for the most part is that and Fathom and either Siren or Horizon do their best to put enough pressure on the ball that the entire team can't fight my 3 fighting core, and then my 3 fighting core I try to just sort of win fights with fundamentals and the sheer strength of the mathematics at play on these 3 cards.
Oh, wow. It actually just sank in because I've been, I've just been listening to what you've been saying at face value. But like, if you are playing this guild, that must mean that they appeal to your style at least a little. So like when like the king of fighting in Guild Ball says that these three are the strongest fighting core, that's like saying something.
Yeah, I think they're at least
'Cause
up
like
there
if you thought
legitimately.
there was a better fighting guild, you would be playing them, right? Or are you just like playing them because they're also interesting?
It's a little bit of both. I definitely wanted to grab them because I wanted to try something a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I think the emphasis in that sentence should be on a little. I really don't feel like totally out of my element. These 3 models are very easy for me to pilot. I think I understand what they're supposed to be doing, and I do them well. And then, like you said, Fathom is just nuts, and I don't. It doesn't take like a scoring savant to pilot this good of a striker to get a goal or 2 every
Yeah,
game.
it's like, hey, can you get to the ball? Yes. Okay, great. Let's do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then to answer your question about Angel and Siren, I do not play Angel. I just people, including me, have been trying to get Angel to work for literal years through very many edits and additions, and 2 guilds that she's in, and she's just too passive, and she does something that her guilds don't really care about. Because yes, with Super Shot up, her 510 kick is absurd, and her tackle dodge is good theoretically, but the 1-inch melee really hurts her, and uh, like yes, 510 is better than like 4-8 or 2-8 navigators or whatever, but it's not so much better that it's worth an entire slot in my opinion.
Right. And her being 6 defense does not make up for the fact that she doesn't have close control or reach.
Right, exactly, and yeah, I mean, if most of the time people just don't care about killing Angel until she's like the only target left standing, and then they'll kill her because it's free points. But
Hmm.
if it's extremely hard to convince someone that they have to try to kill Angel. So if I put Nimble up, they'll just leave, right? It's like it's not
Yeah,
really
great. I'll
interesting.
take a turn off, right? I don't care. If you've made it unappealing to kill Angel, I will kill one of your other navigators.
Yeah. Um, so basically, what I've played every game so far, and what I think is pretty much right, is this 5. Obviously, you have to take Windfinder and Wander, and then I think Ebb, Fathom, and Azimuth are amazing squatties, and I don't really see a reason to ever not take them. And then the last slot is either Horizon or Siren. Um, I personally am favoring Siren right now because I think that using lure turn one and maybe turn two is the kind of simplest way to start a fight that I like, because something you said is still true about the Navigators, despite the fact that they've gotten much better at fighting than they used to be, which is that they don't really want a full scrum, because they will eventually die defensively. Windfinder's pretty vulnerable, Fathom is not too terribly hard to kill, and whichever of Siren or Horizon you take is an extremely juicy target. Obviously, killing Horizon is kind of a mixed bag because it's only one
It's
point.
one and he respawns at full, right?
Yeah, but Siren is very easy to kill for most teams that have credible fighting lineups, and Horizon is extremely easy to kill. And him dying once on his own is really not so bad for the Navigators player. But if it looks like he's going to basically instantly die again, or if they're going to kill Horizon and then they can one round wander through about their necks, then you're actually kind of in a bad way. Um, so I think playing Horizon is like a kind of difficult balance. You want to always make it like an interesting kill, but not like trivial, so that it's not free points, a free single point for them, for
Hmm.
the opponent. But the reason I would take Horizon over Siren is if I felt that the opponent had an extremely strong ball defense mechanism of some kind. So I think,
Like the mash in a corner syndrome or whatever.
yeah,
Like from
exactly.
where if you're gonna kill it far, far away, Horizon just spawns where you are, as opposed to like if you need someone to draw the ball in. It's like he has respawn on their side, which lets you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and I think sorry, I got a message. But I think if you just like didn't know what you were doing, like didn't have a very strong impression of what the matchup was, I would take this six right here, the with Siren as your sixth. I
Hmm.
think that'd be totally fine. Siren. So, oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I sort of interrupted my thought. The Siren solves the issue of the team being still kind of easy to kill because you just grab one model at a time, and then Azimuth hits them and knocks people down. And
Oh, the classic like World of Warcraft pull strategy.
yeah,
She goes
exactly.
in, pulls a mob, and then you take it down with your squad, and then move on to the next encounter.
Right. And Azimuth, I mean, Azimuth, as long as Azimuth has not activated, he is like sort of comically threatening
Yeah,
because as soon as
yeah, no,
he,
like playing
yeah,
playing against him is I don't like if he has the ball, I don't even know what to do. I think I just
no,
do I take delaying activations because am I supposed to attack him? Like his defense is ridiculous, and like my guy's certainly getting knocked down. I just don't
yeah.
like. I guess I would also like to dive into how the hell do you play against this model?
I mean, I think you you basically want to do what I'm describing Siren is doing. You need to figure out a way to isolate Azimuth and kill him between two activations, like between his two activations, basically. Like it's got to be like on turn two he goes and then you knock him down and do some damage, and then at the start of turn three you have to one round him from that point, basically, because it's if he gets to activate again in that situation, even if he will then die after activating, he has created so much value for his team by just spending four influence hitting somebody and knocking down three or four models that
Hmm.
it's just like, I don't know. To me,
It's also a huge influence sink. Like,
yeah.
so if you think about momentum healing as less healing your model and more taxing your opponent's influence, like healing Azimuth 4 is so much better than healing Horizon 4. Like,
Mm,
attacking Azimuth is so much more expensive. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So I
That's definitely
see,
correct.
I see channeling influence through him is massively valuable, and uh, having him have a melee zone again, like being able to engage again if you stand him up is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's like, I think the other thing that you can do to him, and this is definitely guild specific, but he is more vulnerable to range stuff than he would otherwise appear because he cannot give himself defense bonuses against range stuff, and also his like the thing that we're just talking about where he stands up to defend himself and hits people while doing that, or is obviously harder to do if he's not actually currently engaged by stuff. So I think he's more threatened by guilds like engineers or alchemists that have abilities to interact with him and slow him down without being in melee with him. Um, I think it's sort of 18 HP is enough where it's not plausible to straight up kill him from range, but if you kind of chip him down and then go in, I think that's a pretty good way to deal with him.
Like landing a blind against him is pretty realistic because
Definitely.
Def 4, yeah,
Hmm.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
seeing that now.
Yeah. So, but if he, yeah, if he's in the, I mean, this is like part of why I'm so confident in this guild right now, and I'm really having a good time playing them. Is that if he is in the middle of a fight of like six or so models, like three of mine and three or four of the opponents, and he doesn't die in a turn and gets to activate, there's like I feel like I just win that turn, you know, like,
It feels like it. Okay, so I'm not
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Like the reliability with which he hits even the netted dodge on 3 without the momentum
hmm,
is bonkers.
yeah,
And like that's him declining the knockdown on 2 and just I think it sank in when I got netted for the second time in a turn and I was like, "Oh, I should look for the check mark in once per turn." Oh, wait, no, that's just what he does. Okay,
hmm,
got it. Like
yep.
he is a netted bot and he's so good at it.
Yeah, yeah, he's amazing. And Ebb and Windfinder support him extremely well, both. Windfinder by giving extra dice with I Spy or full speeding him ahead
Or
turn
full
one.
speed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Ebb just sort of passively walking around and giving Azimuth and Windfinder anatomical is really
Because
excellent.
like giving him full speed is not just the movement and the charge, it's the fact that he then has his full set of influence when he gets there.
Mm,
Like he just gets to keep doing the thing.
yeah. Um, yeah. And so I guess the other models pretty quickly. I think you were totally correct about Wander. He uses guide once. At the start of the game, definitely you always want to allocate for that because it's really strong early game, and he might do it in the future if you need to correct some positioning info stuff. But otherwise, Wander pretty much always gets 0 on subsequent turns and just gets in the way of people, or is a sort of he's one of the models that benefits from Windfinder's legendary. You just sort of throw him in there to get extra dice because he's kind
Yeah,
of a
here's
pain to.
here's this gang up albatross.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
exactly. So I just try to keep him close to where the fight is and put him in the way of people. But that's pretty much it. Fathom's a god, and then I sort of already described Siren and Horizon. And really, I think, yeah, I mean, like, I think you, like, I wouldn't have even had Angel in my tournament list for the tournament that I'm in right now, except that the Google sheet that people filled out required us to put at least 8 models. So,
That is hilarious.
yeah,
It's like actually I'm just gonna register one fewer. I'm never playing her. Got
yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah.
I'm
um,
gonna make a statement to the community project.
yeah, I think I have a habit of doing that because I did that in the world championship that I ended up winning. I registered less models than I was allowed because I knew that I was only playing 8 models. So,
That
um,
that's stunting. Uh,
yeah, I know it's kind of
I
rude,
I
but
love I love that you won the tournament though. Like it's like I'm playing suboptimally for literally no gain, and I
mhm,
will win. Yeah,
yep,
way to go.
thanks.
All right. Uh,
Yeah,
so I think that does it for Navs.
mhm,
Uh, let's go to I think the other one that I get. So Falconers, I got a really good take from Hot Wings. Like unless something changed, I think I just get it. Like when I the first time I played them, I didn't have Devana go last because she seemed so nuts, and then everything sucked. And then my only question was, when do I play other models? And I think the answer is you just don't play Icarus. You play Egret, and then Vet Hearn never comes in unless I'm crazy.
I don't. Well, I'd have to think about that a little bit because I think there was a time when Vethern is a good pick because he's yet another way to boost up Divana. Just like his like buff thing makes you able to move the bird for free, which I think is pretty cool. But or not for free, but
But for momentum instead.
for momentum
Yeah.
instead of influence. But I think you're probably right because the era I'm thinking about where you would take Vethern pretty often, Matagi was a lot worse, and I think he's like pretty darn good now. So
And I think that the guild is so dependent on Harrier that just going down one Harrier is not
yeah,
awesome. And like, I mean, Icarus literally casts it, but like Egret's just so much better on every axis that you would take Egret and just be down a Harrier.
yeah, I would be pretty hard pressed to take Egret out of there, especially because I think that slot it will be as often trying to defend the ball as trying to score with it, and Egret is probably a little bit worse of a striker than Icaros, but like many many times better as a ball defender. So I think you're probably right about that. Yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, I think I get that. They to finish off, they want to, in the way that the Order is a shock and awe scoring guild, they're kind of a shock and awe murder guild, in which if you ever get attacked again, they crumble like the origami falcons they are. But most of the time, what they want to do is create some zones and then have Divana do her magic and blow people up with really a lot of dice. And then if you get the opportunity to have Egret or Icaros or one of your wingers kick a little great, but that's not plan A.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I actually wouldn't be surprised if you end up scoring goals in the mid game more often than not once you've sort of opened the game up. But the game plan definitely is to do damage first, to like get kills first and kind of use exactly as many of Divana's various options and resources as you need to get a first couple kills. Like trying not to overextend yourself and trying not to spend too much on them, but like kind of hitting that sweet spot where you just nuke a couple people and then you could score a goal. Because I mean, I think
Because like they can't come in and engage because you're already at 8 points or whatever, right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
just like at that point you start focusing on the ball because in order for them to come stop you, they have to then be juicy Harrier explosion targets.
right. And I think at some point, like there can always be in Guild Ball for fighting teams a sort of inflection point where the fight has gone in such a way that people are so spread out that it's actually easier for you to take a goal than it is to keep fighting, even though you don't have like a dedicated striker or whatever. Like sometimes you just have the midfield and sort of have access to the ball, and it's like, well, I mean, 4 points is faster than 2 kills, so yeah,
Yeah. Plus, like the goal influence is nothing to scoff at. So
definitely, definitely.
okay, cool. Uh, the uh the sh so rat catchers are interesting, although that I think I want to talk about rat catchers after I talk about uh the morticians, and I
Sure.
think the morticians are probably the least understood guild by me, and I'm kind of afraid of learning how to play them because I think that I will play nothing else once I do.
They're a very strange
Uh,
guild.
and then so let's go shepherds.
Okay,
So start. I think it makes the most sense then to start with farmers and talk about the delta. So let's bounce to farmers.
okay, sure. Um, so farmers are a they're a fighting focused but not fighting exclusive guild that is kind of I think they're how do I explain this? They have like extremely good offensive base stats. Like they do their damage is higher than everybody else's on like a literal attack to attack basis. They tend to be faster than you might expect for the amount of HP they have. Um, and they have sort of like a side theme of doing like AoE type situation stuff, like with
Right,
Thresher
like
and
Thresher's superpower.
yeah.
So, if I could try to pick, if you don't have the answer to this, so be it. But I imagine that you're the kind of person that probably does. Um, I've heard people talk about how they don't have tack buffs because uh, tooled up is built into the guild, and that's why they have momentous 2-on-1.
Mhm.
Like, do you know what the design decision was behind that? Like, what tooled up being baked in means here in terms of like design space?
Yeah, so I
And
think uh so they came into the game being too strong, and this was that version of the guild was the guild that I won worlds with. And
this was the Thresher Nightmare list.
yeah,
It was like he had
the
like a 68.5 win rate or something absurd.
yeah, he had like a comical win rate, and um, then they got pretty dramatically reworked when season 4 hit, and that's where the quote unquote built-in tooled up thing came from. I think what it is trying to accomplish is to make a fighting focused but lightly mixed team that has this harvest marker gimmick to it, but is still somehow pretty easy to play. Because I think or at least pretty easy to understand. Because I think the release version of Farmers had so many overlapping passive effects and synergies that it was opaque for some people. It was like you looked at the card and they didn't look like I mean they looked good, but they didn't look like the just bonkers craziest guild in the game. if you weren't super like experienced. But then
Yeah,
if they
Mark Rosewater calls this lenticular design, where you show something that's not inherently complex, but the more experienced you are, the more complexity and depth and power you can see. So you can put something out that won't be so off-putting to a novice, but it will still be enticing to a an experienced player. The problem was that it wasn't as straightforward to a novice as it should have been. So you
yeah,
looked at it and they looked basically boring, but under that boring was raw power.
right, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think like I don't know, just very briefly to like explain what this looked like in because it's not a lot of the pieces are still there, but they're not exactly the same. So this was where's Millstone? I don't want to get too deep into the weeds with things that are literally no longer true of the game. But so there was a
If it's interesting, weed away. Like that,
okay,
this is the kind of stuff that like I thrive on. So
yeah. So oops. Um, so there was a time where um, there was a time where at the end of the very end of turn one, just before Thresher went, when Thresher was kicking, and this is the era that I'm talking about where they just got released, they're bonkers crazy, and I'm winning worlds with them.
mhm.
Um, why am I blanking? Who? Oh, Jaxra, right? Okay, so there was a world where you or I guess one activation before. So the opponent has received the ball, and they've been passing around the ball, and they're trying to figure out how to go in on Thresher, who has kicked the ball. And there's basically a situation where his team looks like this, threatening you, and there's these two harvest markers here. So Thresher had native 3-inch melee while he activated, and in this situation that I've described, let me pull up a token. Um, Farmers. Uh,
That's kind of weird. Like that's Mallet's thing. Did Thresher have it first, or did Mallet have it first?
Mallet had it first because he was in the game first, but Thresher had the exact same trait.
Huh.
So there was like a version of this where you would be staring down this barrel, where Thresher is uh, one of the highest damage characters in the game. And he was tooled up. His playbook looked different, but he was still a 7 tack, 6 long playbook character who could give himself anatomical basically by applying Don't Fear or by
Hmm.
applying They Ain't Tough and so forth.
Ain't tough, right?
And so in this situation, he's poised. He's protected by Tater, who has countercharge and a better playbook than he does now. He's also immune to the first condition you apply, and Millstone can take conditions from him uh, forever
After
because
Cocksure falls off.
yeah, and take one for the team was not once per turn at this time. Um, Also, his don't fear the thing that picks up a harvest
The
marker for
AoE.
free and does 3 damage used
Yep.
to be a character play that was 0 cost but took the harvest marker, which doesn't sound like it's different other than bookkeeping, but will if you think about it, you'll realize that means it was also affected by tooled up. Um,
Oh.
so it would do four
Yeah.
damage.
No. If you hadn't said that, I wouldn't have picked that up.
Yeah. So there was this situation you get into where Thresher is threatening like a relatively large swath of your team to one round at least one model and sort of end the turn, then immediately activate again, do another Don't Fear, probably pick up a second kill, and then just sprint back to this exact same setup. Like, just walk back to where he is, having killed two of your models, and be like, okay, you go now. I'm still immune to, like, every effect you can possibly imagine. Um, and uh, I just sort of did that until I won. um,
It sounds strong.
yeah,
It sounds like there's nothing I can do, man.
yeah. I mean, there's like literally some answers. Like they're sort of vulnerable to, as you discovered, things like navigators that that prey on zero armor, low defense models and try to score goals and stuff like that. I mean, navigators weren't in the game at the time, but things like that, like playing shark or something like that, was threatening to this team for sure. But they're farmers could just put you over and over in a situation where you have to kind of pick apart this overlapping set of defensive auras and passive traits. And if you didn't do that perfectly, at the end of every turn, Thresher or Tater would just walk over and kill one of your dudes, basically
Hmm.
trivially. And they kept doing that until they were at 8 points, and then they scored a goal because Thresher also has 8 kick. So that's pretty much how it used to go. So it was too strong. Um,
So it's like, okay, let's pull that off, write it into the book so it's not abused with the passives and
mhm.
the traits, and then not give you this ability. So fine, here you go. It's written in here,
Yeah,
but now it's only in a way where it's controlled. Like
yeah,
if instead of tooled up having these splash damage benefits, it just makes the numbers in the circles go up one, which is what it's supposed to do,
right.
then everything's a little bit better.
Yeah, and they sort of in doing so, they also reworked the playbooks a bit to cap out their high damage stuff. So the guild still does approximately the same or maybe even more damage on like medium to low rolls in over the course of the game, but they tend to not overperform too crazily in sort of a contrast to the brewers, which if the brewers roll lights out or get set up on somebody, they'll nuke them off the face of the earth. Farmers are kind of the opposite. They have like a very high floor of damage, but their
Hmm.
ceiling isn't that crazy.
Ceiling, yeah, the range is small. You're gonna get if what you're trying to do is damage, the delta between minimum damage maximum damage is low as
Right.
opposed to with another fighting guild.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so I think, yeah, I think the rework the rework also affected Grange quite a bit and stopped Grange from doing some what a lot of people called negative play experience
Grange prison.
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Grange prison that you've I'm sure heard plenty of if you've been listening to Vince's content.
Hmm.
Um, but I think overall the rework was broadly a success. It's definitely a new identity, and I think the way I would describe them now is they're like extremely consistent fighting. They're an extremely consistent fighting guild that has kind of a reach and durability sub theme. They're like they've got a lot of 2-inch melee, and they still have a fair amount of defensive tech, but it's not as crazy as it used to be.
Hmm.
And it's also not as complicated to set up, I would say too. There's like a component of that as well. So I don't I try not to comment too much on like the new player experience because it's been so long since I was a new player for this game, but I do think they're simpler to pilot than they used to be. So
The hard part, I think, for new players now is the fact that they have this. I think one of the toughest decisions in the game is whether to harvest a harvest marker and like placing
yeah.
harvest markers. Like I just think that like that's because the thing is like the abstract concept of allocating influence is already super strategic and fun, what makes the game good, but also the hardest thing to explain to somebody who is just learning the game,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like people are so used to, oh, this model gets to move and then attack. It's like, no, this model gets to move and then attack, 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 and this one gets to move and not attack, but I didn't pay any money for it, right? Like
Right.
it's kind of backwards. And I think the idea of like, do I want one more of these like hazy, hand wavy action nuggets, or do I want this thing that gives me what Vince calls influence plus gravy on the field, where it is an influence, but only insofar as I understand influence, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think that they're not super novice friendly, but it does make sense that, like, I wouldn't have seen your John Madden football formation, right? Just playing them without you telling me. So I get that, like, setting up that multi-layered sort of flaky dessert defense would have been
Yeah.
hard to figure out, but it's cool to see, and I like as someone who comes from like TCG and balance background, I was super interested to see like why you would do something like give the entire guild a momentous 2-on-1
Yeah.
and say that that's better and more fair than what they were doing before. So I'm glad we went deep on that.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
Uh, so the shepherds, according to Vince's content when he did the snapshot shepherds, are what if the farmers were 2-2?
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of Shepherd's games played because I guess they're popular to put on YouTube.
Hmm.
And most of what I see is like the dogs kidnapping people
Yeah.
or pushing people off the pitch, and Herder just using six influence better than many models I've ever seen. I think that she's incredible.
Yeah.
The question is, are they actually farmers being 2-2, or are they just more goal oriented than the farmers, and that may or may not mean that they're 6-0 because you had to keep trying to defend the ball from them.
Mm. I think it would be pretty hard for them to go 6-0 against most, if not all, teams. I think they sort of run out of steam at some point, and there's usually some type of at least one or two models that are in the sort of tanky category that's difficult for shepherds to hit, because shepherds share the thing that farmers have that we were talking about, where they don't really outperform. The difference between their max and their min is pretty small in terms
Hmm.
of damage output. I actually think in some ways they mirror the way I was describing Navigators, particularly with Siren, because you're exactly right. The thing that I think they're exceptional at is has a lot to do with Hook and Crook being able to kind of grab somebody and put them in a bad place and then kill them.
Hmm.
um, and I think that's really strong. I think that they're probably most naturally 2-2. I think 4-1 is totally a plausible win condition for them as well. But yes, Herder and Hook and Crook are definitely the all stars in terms of output. And then I personally think Lamb is an excellent support model, but he's a support model. He's not like stunting on anybody anytime soon. He's just sort of, in my opinion, very mathematically strong for both farmers and shepherds.
And having played with Lamb, I was happy because he does the kind of roasty thing where he can always do something.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
if you give him influence, he does stuff. And I guess leverages into the question of when do I not play the box? And
Mm,
yeah, I've had a hard time not playing the box because if I play someone who isn't, if I play either Bush or Honor, I give them a model that doesn't have the Shepherd's bullshit, where if you
mm,
kill them, it's sad times.
right.
So like, I think you always want to give them like you have to kill one of these people, and it's Frown Town, except for who has the nonsense one, Shearer, where like they all get football legend or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, so it's like whatever you can kill Shearer, but the rest of my team, if you kill them, it's super bad.
Mm,
And then uh, I my only other question is Ram on turn one does the sort of like bowling pin thing where he goes from like here to here and just pushes everyone that
right.
like he does the mini festival ult.
Mm.
Uh, is that just like what he does every turn one, or is that something where you're not like that is not always his job?
I think turn one, you'd almost always want to do that. I'm sure there could be some situation where that's not the case, but in general, the reason you do that type of thing in Guild Ball is one of two reasons, both of which are probably pretty obvious. One is that the opponent's team you know is going to try to play back, and you don't want that because you're a melee team. And two is because you set up faster than the opponent does. So most of the time, since turn one is pretty uninteractive, you start pretty far away from the opponent. Both teams are going to try to set up kind of a dream situation, and like how the turn goes is how well they're set up slash how well you get in the way of what they were trying to do, right? And shepherds don't need a ton of setup. They sort of just need to put harvest markers down, and then they're good to go.
That
Herder,
actually feels like a lot of setup to me. Can you break down what the difference between quote a lot of setup and quote not very much setup is? Because playing Hook and Crook and all of the people that need to eat harvest markers, it feels like that's just as costly as taking an activation to put a buff on a captain or something. But it also has this additional point of interaction where if I need the harvest marker to be near the dog that's going to kidnap you, it is by definition closer to you than my backline.
sure, yeah, I can totally walk you through that. Uh, I think one of the well, okay, so I should say that in general, and this is I think in general, the Shepherds are a guild that's very interested in kicking, and one of the reasons for that is exactly what I just said, which is that I think they want to be set up quicker and just like go in, and they have good they have good ways of closing distance with Ram and Hook and Crook. And so if you're at least if you're in the kicking situation, and how fast is Herder? She's like yeah 6'9", right? So oops, that's illegal. There we go. So I think Hook and Crook, and then I don't know. Let's just say we have Shearer. It's whatever. So these guys all get bonked, and Ram puts down a harvest marker. Her harvest is
2 inches, I think.
yeah,
Is it
just two
longer?
inches. So Ram like impetuses, sprints, knocks these people up. Then we get so it's like roughly like that. Sorry, I'm not measuring this, but it's just broad strokes. And then gets a harvest marker up like that. And then Lamb activates, walks up here, puts I don't know 2 harvest markers like bam and bam, or maybe like a little bit less dumb. And you're done setting up. So that's 2 activations. Now, on the assumption that Herder has a ton of influence and is, scary, which is basically what you should always do, first of all with Herder and second of all with the model that you kick with, um, then Herder is, first of all, has been threatening to grab the ball anywhere here, just straight up by sprinting over and grabbing it and trying to score a goal from that position. So it sort of goes without saying in most cases, but I think it's worth saying when we're talking about newer players. The receiving team will almost always grab the ball with their first activation, basically to avoid the kicking model either taking it and kicking it back to their team or taking it and scoring a goal on like the first couple activations. So Herder has this kind of passive threat against the ball, which has required your opponent to take an activation, hopefully to either grab the ball from here, which is one way to do an ideal kick, or to grab the ball
Right.
from somewhere over here, which is another way to do an ideal kick. Um,
Basically, just spending your time.
right, they've passed it, and maybe that model has done some kind of setup. And then, so you activated Ram, and then they have to do another thing, and they might still have to be stewarding the ball, or they're just going to start setting up their captain, and then it is sorry. So then you activate Lamb and you put those 2 harvest markers down, and then they have an activation. So it's their third activation, and it's about to be your third activation. Hook, Crook, and Herder are good to go. So your opponent has a question. Um, they either have to stifle something that Hook and Crook or Herder are going to do, or they have to continue setting up their model if either you had 2 pieces of setup and one of them but you had to go get the ball, so you didn't
Right.
activate your 2 pieces of setup right away, or you have 3 pieces or more of setup.
Sure.
Um,
So it's strictly tempo. I
yeah.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah. It is not that they are more activation efficient. It's that it takes raw fewer activations to be ready to do the thing.
Yeah.
And if you pick one of their activations is half spent on all shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And I think this is both. This is an example of how the farmers and shepherds, quote unquote, built-in tooled up is strong for them,
Yeah.
both in turn one and elsewhere. Because there's with a rule like tooled up, there are plenty of models in the game that will outperform a farmer's model. Right. There's like there are models that, when tooled up, will hit much harder than Herder or even than
Right.
Thresher. But
But without tooled up, Herder's hitting pretty hard
yeah, exactly.
compared to
And
compared to your guy.
and so you always have this kind of intrinsic fighting tempo advantage with these two guilds of just like one activation of setup, which doesn't always matter, but certainly does sometimes. Um, and to me, feels like it does matter for turn one quite often.
Yeah, like the faster you apply pressure, so the more turns of the game, and this is going to sound trivial and tautological, but the more turns of the game, the smaller one activation is in terms of a portion of it, right? But for the
Mm,
first 4 activations of the game, me being one activation up is pretty huge.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, I get it. And then the bushel V honor question. Do I ever play those chuds?
Um, I don't think so.
There's not like an obvious reason to, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe I'll find the situation, but my gut read on it of like I play the box is not. crazy.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Shearer is not that inspiring to me, but I also think Bushel and Vet Honor are not that inspiring to me. So I think you would switch from Shearer to Vet Honor if you really felt like you were harvest starved pretty often, or if Cocksure looked extremely good on Herder in the matchup. But I think defaulting to Shearer is fine. He's not an amazing striker, but he's credible enough that they can't just have the ball near the fight if you're fighting them, right? He can
Hmm.
go with a harvest marker. He can do his 4-inch dodge thing and probably go score a goal. So
Got it. Awesome.
yeah,
All right. Uh, so that we talked about the cooks in the butchers. I think unless there's something we want to specifically talk about when playing just the raw cooks.
I don't think there's
Uh,
something dramatically different now.
and then we have falconers, miners, probably after engineers. Okay, let's bounce to we're now leaving territory, I understand. Uh,
Okay.
so let's talk about um I guess now's as good a time as any for blacksmiths. Alphabetically first.
Okay.
Wh- how- Bro, what the fuck? Uh, I don't even know what I'm doing here.
um, yeah, they're a weird guild. They're sort of the most extreme version of like a fighting guild that has a lot of setup and then a lot of knockdown. Knockdown in the like setup and knockdown sense, though also the condition, I guess. Um, I don't. I've played a ton of blacksmiths, but I don't. I'm trying to think about how exactly to talk about them. It's also right now. I think they're really defined by cast, who is just kind of a bonkers model.
Okay, so that was I heard a lot of talk about the 4.3 buff being ridiculous because of what you can make that second result do, and
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was just so a lot of times in competitive games when there is an errata that looks super strong, once you actually play it, it comes down and doesn't pan out the way that the magical Christmas land made you think it would.
Mhm.
But was that actually not true? Is cast just as bonkers as people thought?
Yeah, I pretty much think so. I mean, I don't think that it's so. I don't think that she's like so completely meta defining that blacksmiths are like obviously the best guild or something. But cast is pretty uniquely absurd. She just it's just extremely easy to get her into positions where she just nukes a model off the face of the earth. And she's way harder to kill than she looks because uh, she can like lower your attack and stuff on a counter attack, and the way the blacksmith and she can always dodge back into why am I blanking the aura that some of their masters have, sentinel, there we go, Jesus. um, but yeah, I think she's pretty crazy. I think you see Vet Cinder and Cast pretty much all the time because they're both very extremely good models, and then the rest is kind of more up to taste and more up to matchup. But basically you have this one model, Vet Cinder, who can explode for a fuck ton of damage, but even if she doesn't do that, she does like a an AoE decent amount of damage with a really frustrating debuff in Searing Strike, which
Hmm.
both hits people's movement and their armor. And then Cast just wears buffs like nobody's business. Like the I don't know if how detailed it was the things you read about her, but like this is another thing where tooled up is
Something,
dumb.
something, something, 8 on 2, right? Like
Yeah,
it's once per turn, do 8, and then someone's also debuffed with her thing.
yeah.
Um, I guess. So on the note of like general things about the game that I don't really understand, when Vince or you talk about having a gun, uh, does that mean it's the thing that you are loading up and then you fire it, or does that mean it's the only thing that you have that's range, or does that mean it's the thing that's like Chekhov's gun where you know it's going to do the thing and then it does the thing?
It's the second one most of the time. It sort of became a meme in the Guild Ball community of like, okay, so let me. So for shorthand, the Strictly the Worst folks and other people would refer to something that is a ranged attack as a gun. So
The
like,
Jakar gun. All
yeah,
I know is that this caused a lot of laughs. I don't know why Jakar is a gun, and that's why I'm asking.
right. So I think it was Vince, mostly because Vince tries to like play off these comparisons very often as though they're like totally obvious and have no differences. But Vince started referring to models that had Back to the Shadows as guns because they at the end of the activation they were far away, so it is as though
It's
they
like
had
they had range. Yeah, it's the same
yeah
thing. Yeah,
yeah
it's there's no difference. It's like how harvest markers are literally influence and totally fungible in 100% of situations. Yeah, I
yeah
get it.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. So I think like people as a joke sort of took this further and further, and at one point I think someone was saying that anything is a gun if it kills the thing it's shooting by the end of its activation. So
Got it.
um
So it's just the alignment chart. Like chaotic evil is like herder is a gun. I got
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yes, so uh Cast literally has a gun because she can deal damage from range because she has shield throw as an ability, so she could cast shield throw and deal damage to someone that is not in her melee range. Um, she is also figuratively a gun because she very often swift strikes away from the person she's hitting and is no longer in melee range with them at the end of her activation. Uh, that is extremely not helpful to any new player, but that is what that means.
Well, and the thing is, like, all I want to do is be able to parse the information that's out there, right? And
Yeah,
there was this like vocab word that I couldn't translate to my mother tongue, and
yeah,
now I get it. And I think that the thing that made the most sense was when you guys talked about when the third captain came out, they got covered in cutlass,
mm,
and then the guild quote got a gun, and they didn't
yes,
have a gun for the longest time. And I think that that was supposed to be their weak spot, right? Was the fact
yes,
that they're super brutal, but like you have to come to them or they have to go to you. They can't just play the standoff game. And then Culver and Cutlass sort of changed that. And then
mm,
this cast buff seems to, I don't know, fly in the face of that. Like it just seems like this does the thing they weren't supposed to do. So now
yeah.
I don't really understand what their design space is.
Yeah, so I think yeah, that's right. So before they were extremely strong if they could get all six models into like fighting range with you because they had a lot of overlapping synergies and they hit extremely hard if they didn't have to charge and they could just walk forward and smash you and stuff was set up on you, blah blah blah. But they really suffered against guilds like alchemists or engineers because it took them a bazillion years to get to them, and by the time they got there, their apprentices were already like half dead or
Half
whatever.
melted because of poison and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, and yeah, Culverin and Cutlass kind of changed that because they gave them really consistent range damage, which still doesn't generate momentum. So it's not like I don't think it takes them into like being an amazing range guild exactly, but it's like they're doing something when they're not in melee, which is probably outside of their original color pie, I guess. And yeah, I think that their central weakness now, and the reason they're not like undisputed best guild, though I do still think they're pretty darn good, is that they always have extremely telegraphed play patterns. Like there's no question basically that the apprentices or the masters have to go first to hit your guys to open them up for your apprentices to come and kill them. And there's like no question about like when cast or Vetcinder or something like Alloy or Sledge is ready to go versus not ready to go. Um, and I think that that is an exploitable weakness, but I think if you whether the Blacksmiths player is playing an less skilled player or someone that's unfamiliar with the guild and kind of just runs forward and wants to interact with the Blacksmiths because they want to kill them and 13 is not a lot of HP, they're just going to get steamrolled, right? Because there's a lot of ways that Blacksmiths sort of statistically outperform every other guild, I think.
So the place where I stumble the most is understanding I think it's possible to build just the worst, most dysfunctional list of all time.
Oh
Like I
yeah, that's
think you
another
can just
thing.
draft
Yeah,
yourself into being upside down and underwater.
yeah, totally. On the blacksmith side, there's huge room for error for playing them and for drafting for them, definitely. Um, the guild is organized in like duos, right? They have like hard synergies for
Teacher and learner. Yeah.
right for most of the people, but the thing is, and the thing that both makes them strong, in my opinion, and also makes them more complicated to play than you might expect, is that the two best. Yeah, so the two best models, or at least the two best apprentices, which is Cast and Vet Cinder, they only have soft leashes to their masters. They don't have hard leashes like the other models in the guild. So Cast's alleged leash is that she really wants fire and she can't apply it herself. And Burnish, because he can do fire at ranged, is, I would say, the best fire applier in the guild. But he is not the only fire applier in the guild. And very crucially,
That Cinder does that. Yeah.
Vet Cinder does that regardless of whether Furnace is on the pitch. So you can take these two guys with almost any set, or not almost any, but with plenty of sets of four other models that don't include one or both of these two guys, as long as there's probably another fire somewhere or something else that they really want, right? So this is, I think, um, I think if the game was still in active development, this is something that I would maybe try to fix, like if I was king for a day, because I think even though it is very fun to play these two models, um, they are kind of breaking a fair amount of rules about how blacksmiths are supposed to be drafted. Like I think if you went back in time and talked to the developers right when blacksmiths were being previewed and then came out, the idea was you'd effectively draft in twos. You wouldn't
Yeah.
literally do that because it's not
Like my first pick is going to be the master, then I pick the apprentice because the synergy is so strong that taking someone out of synergy is leaving too much power on the table.
right, yeah. But you really what you end up getting is lists like uh, say for example, so um, Cutlass and Culverin are a hard synergy, so we have to have those two together. But then, so you'd start with this four, and then your last two slots are kind of situational depending on matchup, which is like not really how they're supposed to be. So like this is like a totally plausible in my opinion lineup with probably Furnace or Hearth as captain. Sort of depends on matchup, but and I think this is a totally rad lineup, and it breaks a hard synergy line in one place, and they also probably would not play the way you'd expect. Where Furnace, you'd be thinking like, Furnace will set up Cinder, and then Cinder will go in. But actually, probably what will happen is Cinder will sort of play on her own. Cutlass and Culverin will set each other up because that's what they do, and then Hearth and Furnace will follow Cast around and make her nuke things. So like the playstyle ends up being different in definitely what I would say an opaque to new players way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does because it is totally opaque to me, minus this, right? Like
Yeah.
this is where I got lost. It was I'd look at lists and it's like, what the hell is happening here? Like is is this actually just Vet Decimate, but it's Cast doing an impression? Like what is
Yeah.
happening? No, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just because certain models outperform. They don't know their role. They
Right.
left the bounds of balance, and
Yeah.
therefore you're kind of free to do things that shouldn't happen. Which is like Cast is fine if only one master's helping her, but because you have two masters that can help her, suddenly she's nutty.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so,
And neither of those masters are the one she was initially paired with. So it's also sort of like
right,
a flavor failing, I guess, too. But yeah.
cool. All right. Well, we are at time. Unless you want to keep going.
I could do
I do not have a hard stop today.
uh you know what? I'm good to keep going, but could you just give me like 5 or 10 minutes? I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
of course. Perfect.
Okay, cool. I will be back in 5 to 10.
Great.
Uh
Mic off. Mic on.
I'm back.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
So
Yeah, thanks.
I
Thanks
think
for the intermission. But yeah, I'm good to go for like
yeah,
another half hour or so. I think that's totally fine.
killer.
Cool.
Let's dive into. We talked brewers, we talked butchers, engineers.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's get all this crap off the field. So engineers are a very flexible guild that I think goes 4-1 or 2-2 pretty much most of the time. Though I think that there's like lists and circumstances where they could even go to the edges. I think the key thing about them is that they're sort of the way they get there is they have a lot of like control, like the sort of light control of like pushes and dodges and knockdowns and debuffs of some kind. And then the other thing is that they are extremely durable, especially their squaddies, I would say. Their captains are a little bit more durable than your average captain, but most of their squaddies are much more durable than your average squaddie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like looks like Colossus is just a giant idiot who lives in the middle of the pitch and doesn't
Yes.
die.
Yep. That's exactly right. I think the other thing that makes them unique is that Nomad is a stupid model and I hate him. Uh,
So Nomad seems like he's clever for clever's sake. Like he seems like he's just a sweet game design meme
yeah.
where he kind of does whatever he needs to do, and it's like, oh, he only has one of these stats. It's like, well, no, he Schrodinger's has all of them, right? So you have to play around all of them, and then he only picks the one that's
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much right. And I think the other thing is that because of that, he wears buffs extremely well. So there's like a lot of good reasons to put stuff on top of him. Like, for example, one of the things that drives me nuts is I think that the I think all three captains are like at least playable, but I think the one that you see by far the most right now is Rivet.
Rivet, I would guess,
And
yeah.
Rivet, first of all, as long as she's on the pitch, giving an additional +1 tack to Nomad, so he can be 7 tack if he wants, and then especially Rivet giving 2-inch melee via use this to Nomad is really stupid because the 2-inch also applies to his unpredictable movement. Um, so
Oh, sure, because his melee zone is bigger. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
so he becomes incredibly difficult to like hit just full stop because he's 5-0 2-inch melee unpredictable movement with 6 tack on a counterattack that with a 2-inch reposition on 2. So there's sort of a window of opportunity before Rivet has activated in a turn, um, where Nomad can be hit and killed, but it kind of just goes away if Rivet puts that buff on him, in my opinion, which drives me nuts.
Sure.
um, but that is, I mean, to be fair, that is sort of in the like color pie of engineers because it's a way to be durable. It's not the usual way that they're durable, where literally they just don't take a lot of damage because they have tough hide and reanimate and so forth. But you could definitely characterize Nomad as durable.
Right.
But yeah, I think the other thing is that Pinvice is very super solo y, but then Rivet and Ballista are much more supporty, and they tend to. I think one of the other things that sort of characterizes engineers, and they're not totally alone in this, but it's kind of rare, is that they tend to get pretty equal work in a game out of all of their models that aren't a mascot, if that makes sense. Like, there's.
It, it's so weird that you characterize Pinvice as being solo-y. Like if I were stack ranking them, I would have stack ranked her as the most uh supporty because like all of her character plays buff
Mhm.
somebody. She doesn't have high damage numbers in her playbook, and her well-oiled machine is uh, literally applies to. Oh, it's not machines anymore.
No,
It's
no,
just
it's
anybody.
just
Okay,
anybody. Yeah.
but like, it just seemed like she was supposed to be the Rube Goldberg captain, where you just like turn this cog, turn that cog, tighten this nut, twist this screw. Okay, cool. Press the button, score a goal.
I think that's correct, but I think that I think that what ends up being the case is that most of the actual action happens on Pinvice's activation. Like, well-oiled machine is good for everybody, but when you have 6 influence, it's especially good for her to pass to somebody, dodge, and have them pass it back immediately, and
Yeah.
dodge again,
Yeah.
and then go a million miles and score a goal. Or I think the other thing that's unique about her is that with Ratchet on the pitch, she can both have +2 damage for after deleting herself and tooled upping from Ratchet, and also have a free charge, which is something that the other 2 captains can't because they're not Mechanica.
Okay.
So
Sure.
she spends 1 influence to deletion herself, but she still gets 6 actions because she gets a free charge and 5 more attacks, and they're all +2 damage. Which is there's like sort of a realm of damage where she still doesn't destroy the biggest models in the game, but she kind of is she's like close to guaranteed to kill middle-sized models with that
Mm-hmm.
setup, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Which I think is also often how engineers play, is they want to go for the sure thing a lot of the time. Both because they don't have a ton of momentous damage, so they don't get a lot from overkilling people, and because they have really consistent kicks. Like outside of probably Navigators, they have the best kicks in the game.
Yeah. They like every model has 4, 4, 6, 4, 8. I thought that that was like part of what made me think that they were supposed to be 3-0 because their design space is like we all have close control and we all have ridiculous kick.
Well, they have ridiculously consistent kick, but they don't actually have the majority or like the most instance of 8-inch kicks, which I think is more like I think it's less that it's less that engineers always want to score 3 goals, and more that engineers always want to use and have the ball in some way. Sometimes
Hmm.
that's scoring goals, but sometimes it's using the ball plus Harriet's aura to move people around in a fight very efficiently and consistently.
And while generating momentum.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say they are very ball focused, but that isn't necessarily always in the service of goals. Whereas, like for example, we
That's a
talked.
valid distinction that I hadn't really considered.
Yeah, it's sort of honestly, people don't talk about that type of thing enough about like how well the guild uses the ball if they're not explicitly going for a goal immediately. Like this is in contrast to a scoring guild like Shark, where Shark doesn't actually spend a lot of time holding the ball. He basically
No, it's acquire ball, put in goal.
right. He basically shoots the ball as soon as he can every time, and and then on the other end, Brewers will hold on to the ball if they receive for almost the entire game, but they'll do almost nothing with it. They just don't want it to exist, right? So
Hmm.
at least until the end of the until they get to 8 points and want to score a
It's
goal
like
or something.
okay, okay, Friday, the ball's real now. Go do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that um, that's like an important way to think about statistics in the game, like kick statistics and stuff like that, and also things like well, like Order, you're playing a lot of Order. Order both wants to score the goals and
And
wants to
also
use the ball
not give out
constantly.
the ball, right? Yeah.
Right, which is
So it's that's why the ball of light is so dope. It's because I
exactly.
get to play the like otherwise it's like, "Oh, look at all this cool shit I'm doing." It's like, "Well, how many points do you have?" None, but look at all this cool shit I'm doing. So
Yeah,
now it's like, "Oh, cool, I get to do the cool shit and also play the game."
right. And so yeah, and that's it. That's how it used to be. Like before the ball of light existed, it was like Order either get to use all of their rules or try to actually win the game.
Right, not a great choice.
Mm.
That's the world's worst trolley problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I think engineers are a very ball active guild, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to be shooting. Um,
And the thing is, like, it when you read the two mascots, it kind of makes sense, right? Like,
mhm,
it's this is kind of a cheaty face way to do it, but if you look at what a mascot or a set of mascots does for a guild, you kind of get an idea for what the designers thought that they should be doing.
mhm.
And like both of the mascots are like, we pass or we reacquire the ball. That's what we do. Like, I am a ball passing robot.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Um, yeah, ball retrieval and ball passing for sure. And I think, for what it's worth, just to talk about lineups a little bit, I think you pretty much always see mainspring. I think Mother has some interesting things that she can do on her own, but it's not quite as much or quite as consistent as mainspring is, and she is extremely victimy. Like 3-1 with 9 HP is and no defensive tech
Right. Yeah, you hit her
is
and no one cares that you hit the lovable dog, right? You've hit
yeah,
a scary
exactly.
spider robot. Like obviously the crowd wants you to kill this beast.
Yeah, and she doesn't explode the way Mainspring does. So like speaking as someone who fights engineers and like plays fighting guilds mostly, if someone put Mother on the pitch, I would try to kill her pretty often because I don't think it would take a lot of my resources to do so, and I would constantly get activation advantage from it, which is a bad
Hmm.
look. So I think you pretty much always see Mainspring, but you're right that both of them speak to like the theme of the guild pretty well. I think.
Uh, Touching on activation advantage for a minute.
Hmm.
This is something where uh there was this, and I don't really, since the blog was nuked from orbit, I can't actually read anything official from Steamforge, which blows my mind.
Yeah,
But
it's so stupid.
uh, at some point, they were doing this like Guild Ball field test or beta testing rules or whatever.
Hmm.
And one of the things that they were doing was you get skip activations. Is that something that just makes the game better and I should be doing in my games, or does it actually take away part of the inherent strength of being a fighting guild, and because scoring is inherently strong already because of goal influence and whatever, you need that to be good at fighting?
Um, I think. Well, okay. My personal opinion is the second thing. Is that right now scoring is in a good spot in terms of the metagame and the strength of the models that do a lot of scoring and the strength of the guilds that do a lot of scoring. Um, and I would not make that change because I think that that would invalidate a lot of playstyles that I think are still viable. Um, that is honestly something that I would probably, if I was really genuinely considering making that change in my local community or whatever, I would ask around other experienced players because that set of changes I did not personally test a lot. So I think I tested it with a couple games, but it wasn't. That was at a point in the game where I sort of had this impression. First of all, I was dialing back my involvement in the community. I wasn't like playing like double digits of games every week anymore. And
Sure, it's
also,
like when you were starting grad school and quitting and whatever, right?
yeah, exactly. And also, it was by that time I had sort of, partially just due to what was happening that everybody knew, but also because I had sort of in base because of my status in the community, I had like a little bit of insider information. I had started getting the impression that Steamforge was like kind of bailing on Guild Ball or was going
Hmm.
to at some point soon, and so the idea of testing new changes that I didn't think would ever become official wasn't interesting to me.
Yeah, why
Um,
would you sink your time into it, right?
yeah, I just kind of wanted to play the game that I already knew I liked. So I would say that I don't think that that's a good change, and that I think that would do things to the game that would, at least if you wanted to make that change, you'd have to make a lot of other changes to how the game worked or how specific models worked and stuff. But I really do think that's worth like polling people about if you're curious, because I think a lot of
Sure.
people have more information on that.
Were there any of those sort of slew of changes that did seem just prima facie a good idea? Like the one that most uh read to me as reasonable is that it shouldn't be first or second that gets the momentum, it's the team that doesn't have the ball.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I don't know. I would have to think about that stuff more honestly. I don't want to give you like a concrete answer without
Okay.
thinking about it
Yeah,
too hard, but
awesome. I wasn't sure. And the thing is, the explanation of like I didn't actually play because there were all these factors that got me to not test it. That makes sense to me.
yeah.
But uh my interest was, oh, hey, like I read these things and the inherent game designer in me was like, oh, that's like something that someone would have suggested at work and we would have tested. And then if it reaches the point where we're sharing it with players, it's something that we probably think is a good idea. And if the players just immediately thought, like, oh, yeah, this is reasonable, let's just test it. Like, basically, I wanted to make sure that I was checking the box of like, is this just like probably a good idea, but maybe not a good idea for the like the dot 0.01%. And if that's the case, then I'll implement the change. But if it's more a question and it would require severe errata or at least severe consideration, then I'm fine playing the game as written.
Yeah, I'm relatively happy with the status of the game right now, and I guess I just think broad structural changes like that require um, balanced decisions. To me, I think. I don't know. Yeah, I just have to think about that type of stuff more because I'm very conservative about like calling for big changes like that. I guess because to me, a lot of the time, the balance, or if not the balance, then sort of the flow of Guild Ball is very delicate, and there's been a lot of times where like a new release or a change to the rules has had not only uh, effects that I didn't think the developers expected, but also that I didn't expect either. So, but if you're, I guess what I would say is if you and your local community is running into a lot of situations where whoever is your fighty guy player is just like jailing a model and then killing them and then winning the game off of that over and over again, multiple times a game or multiple times a tournament or whatever, then I would test it out just for fun, just to like see if that changes that
Yeah, for
experience.
sure. Like it's and the thing is when we are the only enforcement body, making those changes make sense, and like we all happen to be people who like, changing the rules of things.
Right. Yeah.
That
Totally.
seems worthwhile. It was more just like yeah, I don't have enough of a background in the game to know if that was worth it or not.
Hmm.
And it seemed like it changed a major dynamic, so I kind of wanted your take on it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I guess I just for the purposes of like giving you something to think about. Vince and I, around the time that Guild Ball was dying, were sort of interested in like presenting an alternative rule set that we didn't get super terribly far in, but we had some like core rule ideas that we tested a few times. And the change, the broad strokes change that I liked the most, but which is something that does require a lot of rebalancing, it's sort of like built into the idea, is we would do some combination of buffing scoring teams and nerfing fighting guilds, but we would make goals 3 points instead of 4 points.
Yeah, that was one of the changes where like someone suggested, or at least on the history of this change that I read, they were like you would score 3 points on a goal, but a screamer would be four, as
Yeah.
opposed to and then also a shot on goal would generate a momentum, which is just a change I like in and of
Mm,
itself. Like not if not for any other reason than a missed goal is so backbreaking
yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Exactly.
that like I don't think that a missed goal because so much went into that goal run,
Yeah.
right? Like I kind of want a shot on goal to be worth a point almost, where like
Mm,
even if what you're doing is like making shots on goal to advance the game state, like if yeah, I don't even know like the flavor doesn't really work for that, but I
yeah.
feel like making a shot on goal should be worth something. If not momentum, then or if not points, then momentum or vice versa. I feel like it's the missed goal problem is super demoralizing and strange, and most of the time it happens because of a fluke of the dice. Like
Right.
if you miss a goal when you're taking a risky goal that you bonus time to two dice and there's an intervening model and like TN is five or whatever, like fine, right? That was
Yeah.
a high dramatic moment where there was a lot of counterplay involved and suddenly the goalkeeper rules actually make sense on the table, whereas like most of the time the goalie is like not a goalie, right?
Mm,
So like that's fine to me, but when like a navigator who's in tap in misses it, like what the fuck happened? And like, is this even a game anymore?
yeah.
So,
Exactly. And yeah, I totally. I mean, I think I can't remember if we settled on wanting to do that or just talked about it, but I think having missed goals also be worth a single victory point, I think is a good idea. Too, and that's something we considered. And yeah, it has like this weird flavor question about like what the fuck, what the hell kind of sport is this?
right.
Uh, but yeah, I totally, I think you've identified a lot of key problems. And to me, the issue was never, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I like it, but I don't think that jailing models is like inherently a bad style
I
of play to
so
have the game. But
I don't either. The problem is how ubiquitous it seems like it is. Like it seems like
mm,
it has to be executed for you to be playing fighting guilds properly, right? And
yeah,
like it's not a negative play experience per se, but are you familiar with the concept of like net fun?
yes, yeah, yeah,
It's yeah, so briefly it's just like is the thing fun enough for me to cause to be worth
right.
you having this much net anti fun, so to speak.
Mm,
And like I feel like jailing a model kind of fails the net fun test, not by a lot, but like it's
yeah,
not super fun for me, right? It's just me killing a model and putting you down in activation, but like it's frustrating because if executed properly it kind of removes the jailed person's agency and what to do.
mm,
And in doing so, you're put in this sort of weird prisoner's dilemma where you either do or don't give them influence, and if you don't, then they get to do the killing whenever, and if you do, then you're just down the influence as well as the activation. And it's weird because like all of these things are predetermined, but still taxing and still require player emotional investment and involvement in a way that doesn't yield utility or fun, and that kind of is a waste of brain space and power, right? Like,
Yeah.
and when you're teaching someone the game, you just don't do that sort of thing, and it's weird because you want to be teaching the game in a way that, you don't want to be teaching strategy, but you also don't want to be teaching a game that isn't the game that you're going to play. You want to teach a game that's reflective of the actual game. And I think
Hmm.
that jailing is like something that's super novice unfriendly. It's like pretty caustic to new players.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. I think that's right.
and it also makes it feel like you've made a terrible mistake. Like, I think the other thing that's weird is like, I take my favorite model that's good at scoring and then you kill it. Like, did I do something wrong? Like, no, it was 4 for 2, right? Like, and you get to jog your person back on the pitch, but it's
Mhm.
counterintuitive in a way that's not hard to parse in the way most people say counterintuitive, but it's counterintuitive in terms of like outcomes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I would expect this outcome to be different if I was doing the right thing, but instead I do this thing that was wrong, or I do this thing that was right, but the outcome feels wrong to me.
Hmm.
And so looking for ways to make that not inherent to the game is hard because it's inherent to the game for a reason. Like, that is the balance, right? But
Yeah.
wanting to change that was just something that I find interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, so anyway, that was a fun flight of fancy. Thanks for flying along with me.
Yeah. No problem.
And then let's close out with, we talked engineers, farmers.
Oops, I killed the ball.
Let's close off with I think I know fish. Let's bounce to them another time. Let's close off with hunters because they're at the top of the stats right now, and I kind of don't have any idea of what they do except that I think Scatha, and I kind of refuse to acknowledge this because of how much fun I have playing brisket. I think Scatha is just a better brisket, so maybe I'm closeted hunter player, but I don't know.
um, that particular comparison, it might be true that Scott is a better brisket, but I don't think she has a better scoring team. Like, I have to think about that a bit more, but like, I don't think, like, certainly even a Skada-led Hunters team is not going to straight up outshoot the Union. I don't think.
Well, and the thing is that kind of leans me to want to play them even more, right? Like, I keep convincing myself that like with Fangtooth and Spigot and maybe even Benediction, I can fight, but I
Yeah.
can't. It's 3-0. That's all I do. And if it turns out that Scatha does the brisket like yakety sacks around the pitch, and I also can fight, that might just be what I want to do with my life.
Mhm. Well, I will say that I personally am a huge fan of Skatha, and she is not really in favor right now. In sort of broad playing patterns, to my knowledge, I think
Yeah,
the
the numbers point to steel draw, which
yes,
I
yeah,
get it. It's like it's traps memes. You really delivered on this synergy, Captain. I think that like it's what the hunters wanted to be, and Theron couldn't really do it. But
hmm
I still think that like I don't know, if I played, I'd probably either play mono bear control or it's Scotha time.
I think if I was playing hundreds, I'd almost certainly play Steel Just Skatha, and I'd probably try to like play them a roughly 50-50. I don't know. I'm not super confident that would work out, but I think that so they are the most control-y guild that are not morticians. They are.
See, you're really revving my engine, man. This is not help. I'm switching hunters. Let's go.
Okay. Well, if you want very specific hunter's advice, a good friend of mine, Nate, who's Ghost Deer on Discord, plays a ton of hunters, and it's a very, very good hunters player from California. He could probably give you some more specific tips, but I can walk you through the basics because I've played
If
them a
people
little.
want to keep passing around the anchor around your neck that is me to hook people into hours of conversation about Guild Ball, man, I am glad to be the community onus. But uh,
Nate is
I'll take
actually
any names that you want.
Nate is the guy who replaced me when Pat and Vince decided to do a podcast about Marvel, and I didn't care because I don't
Oh,
really like that game.
the
But
the taco truck.
yeah, Alfredo's size 3
I
taco truck.
I'll move on to it once I've finished. I'll admit I haven't listened to literally every Strictly the Worst episode yet. I am
Oh, that's okay.
embarrassingly far along though. But when I run out of content, if it turns out that I can't actually spawn my little Guild Ball biodome, I
Mhm.
might pick up Crisis Protocol or War Machine. I hear that game's pretty good, and there are elements of War Machine that are in this game. I don't know, but like
Yeah.
again, my background in Paint and Measure is that I played a couple of them and they were all bad, and I played 40K and I was like, oh my god, never again. And then I just missed Guild Ball forever, and when I played it, it was like, oh, this is actually just super deep. It's every model is a champion in League of Legends, and it's
Yeah.
like it's dice rolling, but the playbook makes it feel like it's not. Well, I spiked, so this model's dead. It's like no, you get options, right? And it's not necessarily insane.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I will say that I've tried a lot of miniatures games, and to me, Guild Ball is still by far the best. I think even a lot of like active Crisis Protocol players will say that if you ask them, they're just like not interested in playing a game that was
a
that
dead game. Yeah.
not only a dead game, but like the way the company ended really left a sour taste in the mouth of most of the like active Guild Ball
Yep.
players. But
Well, I mean, they put the sour taste there almost on purpose.
yeah.
It was a thing where like I watched Vince's end of Guild Ball video, and
Oh yeah, that
the
was pretty
meme where
good.
he's like, "They did not write that. They did not. No, I didn't read the blog. There's no way they wrote that." It's like,
Yeah,
oh my god, I guess they did.
yeah,
Like I went to the Wayback Machine to read it because I was like, this can't be as bad as people are writing it out to be, and it's like, oh, it wow. I do not know how this happened, but I chalk it up to like it being six people and one person was caught in an interview that said something they probably shouldn't, and yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty wild.
yeah. Um, but anyway, hunters. uh, so I think Steeljaw and Theron are pretty easy to compare, and like in a broad strokes way, they have similar ideas. They're both about control and sort of like a way to defensively chip people down until there's an opportunity for a really strong kill. I would say that Theron chips people at range, and his control is at range. And if you get to Theron's team, he's in a bad way if he hasn't already like taken off half of your health or made it extremely expensive. Blah blah blah.
Kind of Falconer or Alchemist style.
Yeah, I would say closer to Alchemist because Falconers will often straight up kill you at range, and Theron won't really ever do that. He'll just make the closing the gap thing take 1,000 years, if that makes sense. um, and then I would say Steeljaw is sort of the same deal in a broad way, but she's like more closer range about it. It's almost like you get to melee with her team, but there's actually still several layers of control and defense between you and having good attacks, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
there's always traps being pushed down that you're put down that you're being pushed into. You get knocked down, you get disarmed, blah blah blah, all this crap. And Steeljaw is very strong right now, and very popular. She really makes all of her squatties have pretty self-sufficient activations because a lot of them get traps, and the abundance of traps means that people are pretty much set up all the time. I said I would probably play Skatha and Steeljaw. That's because to me Steeljaw and Theron are like close enough that I don't
Close
think
enough
there's
that
enough.
yeah, there's no reason to double up on them. So
Yeah,
you play Skada because you have the actual choice in a draft to play a different style.
right, exactly. And Steeljaw, or sorry, Skatha can still control people to some extent, but it's way way lower than Steeljaw and Theron. But Skatha makes up for that by having like being a legitimate solo scoring threat, and also by buffing her team's movement, which is not something that the other two captains do. They penalize the opponent's movement, but they never make their team faster. But Skatha does that, which is cool. Um, and she also has. I feel like I should just call this out because you're trying to learn from a community that's been wiped from the face of the earth in some ways. Um,
Yeah, hit me.
Skada is the sole proprietor of the Tokyo Drift, which is a maneuver where Cena is given Blessing of the Moon Goddess so that he
And
gets a
then you get a bunch of dodges.
yeah
That's where the name comes from. Because Kodiak Drift seemed like the most fun list where you just like scoot a bear around, but I didn't
yeah
really know how that worked.
yeah, and specifically the thing that I think of when I think of Tokyo Drift is Cena charges or runs or whatever to sort of like um, where's a character to adjacent to a target like herder right here, and then um, makes an attack that gets at least 5 hits, which allows you to do the mauling. And then, since Skatha's Blessing of the Moon Goddess applies a playbook result, and you can apply playbook results in any order, Cena dodges behind Herder and pushes her into the team with the mauling. That's the Tokyo Drift. Um,
That's baller as hell.
yeah, it's so cool, right? I think it's so funny. Just imagining that happening in real life.
I can hear the WWE theme music, and then it just does the smash cuts of a Fast and Furious movie as you just like raffle kick her into the squad. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so I might lose a lot of tournament games if I was playing Skatha competitively because I'd really be trying to do that every game at least once.
Yeah, no, you gotta do the hot shit. Like
Yeah,
I'm going to Lee Sin kick you into my squad. Let's
yeah,
go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, in sort of, I think hunters have a few really excellent squaddies and then some pretty solid support pieces. I think you see Cena in pretty much every list nowadays because Cena used to be
Like
more.
independent of captain.
I think so because every captain has a little something for the bear, and the bear really is just a big threat that is he's like not as big a threat as Vet Catalyst, for example, but he also, or I think it's a she. I think technically it's a she, but anyway, um, but she's also not as much of a liability as Vet Catalyst. 3-0, still not great, but she's got tough hide and 21 boxes, so it at least takes a long time to
I
kill her.
mean, she seems like it's other than empathy. Like it seems like it's just a challenge where it's like, oh, my job is to sink influence into this bear, I guess,
Mm,
and then kill it eventually. But
yeah, and there's also
is the bear
this.
still good in a world where it doesn't? The bleeding thing seems so dumb.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
crazy. No, I still think Cena is good just because the I mean, the guild is the snared guild, right? And that condition is still just absurdly ubiquitous in the team, regardless of captain. Like Steeljaw applies it the most, and I think that's part of why she's most popular right now. Is her synergies are most directly like complementary, because
yeah,
it's sort of brain dead to apply snared when you're putting down like a billion
yeah.
traps every game.
She's got a bunch of oops, and then it's like, oh, hey, look at all these alleys I have, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
um, but Theron has access to snared as well. And Theron also makes it cheaper for other people to apply snared with Blessing of the Sunfather. And then Skatha is definitely the one that struggles the most to put snared down herself. She can only do it through Cold Snap, which you definitely won't
she's
necessarily.
about moving, man. She's about cold and slipping, not about snaring it down. I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. She won't probably cast Snow Cold Snap every turn, though she will cast it every game for sure. But the thing that she gives to Cena that's unique is she makes Cena faster, and she does it for free. Like she can, I think playing the game with Skatha and Cena is trying to always get Nature's Chill, the fast ground AoE, on top of Cena and one other model, because when Cena has a walking threat of 9, it's a real pain in the ass to deal with. That's a lot of real estate where Cena can just walk up and make 3 attacks. So the fact that you have your snared output is lower than the other two captains is made up for the fact that Skada for two things. One, that Skada will speed up the bear pretty consistently, which is really cool, but two, that since Skada is by far going to get the most goals of the 3 captains, Cena is not like trying to get 6 kills or whatever. She's trying to get 2 kills after you hopefully get 2 goals. So um, it's maybe a different role for the bear, but I still think I would put the bear in every list.
Okay, so let's round out a Skatha Steeljaw either roster or a Skatha actual sick.
Sure. So a Scathe 6. Let's see. I think I would probably put Snow as personal preference, but I really do think both mascots are solid.
So that was a really hard choice because I'm just reading Fahad like this he seems good.
Mhm.
Like I just don't see like he's simple, but like he just seems good.
He is, but he's also well, two things. He's also extremely vulnerable, which is kind of rough, and he has no defensive tech the way Mother does. The way, like, for example, Mother also has no defensive tech, right?
Yeah,
He has 6 HP, no defensive tech, really no way to defend himself if he's engaged. I mean, his attacks are okay, but they're not great for disengaging himself. Snow is sort of another to me. Snow is like another roadblock on the way to actually hitting hunters in a big way. I think you mostly play for pack mentality, but I also think that giving anatomical to Skatha on her first goal run can actually be a big difference in terms of what
oh,
she can
getting
do.
the hits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not only getting the hits, but there's like if she's anatomical and she charges someone who has kind of bad defense, there's a chance that she wraps, and if she wraps, she's just like her attack becomes
actually gone.
yeah, her she either dodges like 4 or 5 inches away after while still tackling, or she gets to tackle, dodge 2 inches, and cold snap half of your team, and that's really painful to deal with on turn one. So I think that even though you could look at the math, and even with anatomical, she's not likely to wrap on a lot of targets. A lot of people don't defensive stance Skatha's charge because they know that her tackle's effectively automatic. But if she's
Yeah,
sitting on anatomical, you're still playing with like a 20 to 30% chance that she wraps, and I think that's worth paying an influence to make possible, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so again, this is I really do think
It almost
the
feels like it would be worth paying a momentum to bonus time as well.
yeah,
Like,
totally. I think it can be. I think you'd want to look at the math on that or try to remember like how much it's giving you because different defensive profiles will pay out bigger, but
right, right.
that's a pretty small minutia. But that would at least be something I'd consider because the wrap is really sick. I think Minx is really, really good. I think that Minx is pretty much good all the time. I think Minx and Cena would be in every hunter's list I play, and that's not true of any other models in the guild. I think Minx is just incredibly difficult to kill because she'll almost always get a little chip damage on you, and the guild is kind of the guild of chip damage, so she's very often going to be 5-1 against attacks, which is horribly punishing. Um, but she kind of demands attention because she's putting down traps, which is annoying. She's giving probably your captain Blessing of the Sunfather almost every turn, which is a huge pain in the ass. Because for Skatha, it means she can give Blessing of the Moon Goddess or Snowball to herself for free. For
Right.
Steeljaw, it's huge because she can bait for free and still make 6 attacks if she wants to. Um, or just bait for free and be sitting on no influence. There's sort of like two speeds for Steeljaw. She can be like going in and smashing people, or she can just be baiting and sitting around.
Just like dirtling in the background doing stuff for free.
Right,
Yeah.
and both of those are made much better by Minx putting Blessing of the Sunfather on her.
Yep.
But then I think maybe the biggest reason why she demands attention is that if she gets marked for death up and Cena can benefit from it, that model is dead. Like, see, it puts Cena up to a um, a 9-inch threat, or I'm sorry, an 11-inch threat normally, or a 13-inch threat if Skatha can also speed up Cena,
Hmm.
and it gets charged for free, so it's going to charge and make 2 more attacks. And Minx has almost certainly put a trap down as well, so Cena can trigger the trap with either a wrap or by hitting the mauling and pushing them onto the trap, right?
Hmm.
So Minx leading the way for Cena is like you have to either leave or move Minx somehow because your thing is just dead otherwise. And I think that's sort of
Hmm.
like a key 1-2 punch for how hunters will structure their offensive ideas. Let me think. So I think we want Egret in here because she's really good and she's like sort of another striker. You can kind of do stuff with her, especially with Skatha's buffs. Um, she with Blessing of the Moon Goddess, she gets tackle triple dodge on one, which is pretty obnoxious.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's quite a result.
and then I think the sixth would be based on matchup, but I can give you some options. I like these models a lot. Uh, so Jakar is like a secondary heavy hitter, and this is if you play Jakar, I think you'd be telegraphing that you're going for 2-2 or even 4-1. I don't think you're ever gonna even get close to 3-0 with this six with Jakar. But I think your fighting is a lot better, and especially if you see that you're playing against a team that has not a lot of great counterattacks, that Jakar is really going to be able to like walk up to someone and make 4 attacks, then I think he's golden. He does a hell of a lot of damage. It's kind of crazy sometimes. Because he'll gut and string on the first attack or put down a trap and push you into it with a push dodge, and then you're just in all kinds of hurt. Um, Chaska is more defensive, but I think he's good. I think that if you played Chaska, you could go for a 2-2 or 4-1, and I think Chaska, Cena, and Minx would be trying to isolate a single target and kill them, and you'd want to do that twice probably. And then Skatha and Egret would try to go for a goal. You'd probably be. I think this lineup's a little bit more expensive in terms of influence because you're going to be paying for more character plays, but I do think it's strong. That would be something I would want to test out. And then Edge is the 2-2/3-0 option. Edge combined with combined with Skatha's what is it called? Nature's Chill. Combined with Skatha's Fast Ground has sort of a comical amount of
Yeah, it's preposterous,
yeah.
right? Like the thing is, I was reading Edge and like thought the was a fine model, and then I saw that she had unorthodox, which is the same as Lane's like nonsense tackle on every result,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, actually, this is just like the silliest thing I've ever seen,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like,
Edge is like we were talking about in our other session. Edge functions similarly to Mist in this lineup, where it's like you take your first goal with Mist or with Edge instead of Skatha, or you take an easier goal with Edge instead of Skatha, and then you expect Edge to die. But I do think Edge is better than Mist in that role because while Mist has the benefit of 2-inch melee, which is a big deal sometime, Edge's tackle having a dodge on it and potentially 3 inches of dodge is stupid. And
yeah,
I think if you have the time in terms of activations to set up Edge, she'll be doing one of those goal runs that your opponent doesn't even try to stop. They just like look
right.
at it and they're like, okay, this thing goes like 40 inches or whatever. So yeah, go
Got it.
ahead.
You scored. I understand. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and I think
And so, does Chaska, before we get too far away from him, does he kind of play the stave role in this world where like I'm doing setup and setting traps, and if you walk in, then you get off my property and I boombox you for 4, or like is it more that he would actually credibly go fight somebody?
I think I think in this role he would most of the time be the first thing you said, and I think the idea would be like, okay, you have somehow between Skatha and Minx and Cena gotten someone isolated, and Chaska's job is to keep them isolated, if that makes sense, to make sure that your opponent doesn't bring too much backup, or anyway, it takes a long time.
Oh, because he has a gigantic push.
Yeah, exactly. He has a huge push, and he also puts down a trap. And if one of your models is like the only model within hitting range of your opponent, he can add armor to it, so it makes the like counterattack difficult, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I do think he's like a fine secondary damage threat behind Cena. He definitely won't do as much damage as Cena, but the momentous 2-on-2 with 5 tack is totally reasonable, and he's also good at pushing people into his own trap. Um,
Right.
the only thing I'd say is that depending on the opponent, like some opponents will have good enough counterattacks that he really needs someone else to knock him down first,
Hmm.
or at least like crowd him out. Excuse me, crowd him out so much that he can not worry about a counterattack coming in.
Hmm.
So situationally, I think he does plenty of damage for sure.
And then, are you familiar with the concept of trinket text from games? Uh,
No, not really. Sorry,
so
I'm not actually that familiar with Magic, but
no worries. So trinket text is something that's on like some league champions and some magic cards and some models in games where it's like uh it's something where it reads exciting and even though it's not that big a deal and you don't really count it. So like I would consider with aplomb on brisket 3 to be trinket text.
oh
Where
sure, okay.
like it's like something where you read it and it's like, oh, I can imagine where this is cool. I know it doesn't really come up, but like isn't that fun? And
Hmm.
like I think that I'm reading a bunch of trinket text on a lot of hunters about this like rough ground matters stuff. Like,
Yeah,
do I actually care about that, or is it mostly just like gravy if I pull it off, but I shouldn't really give a shit?
I think the level of caring you should give to that is you should never draft just because of it, but you should be thinking about it when you are playing activations. So like there's there are a fair amount of activations in an average game of Guild Ball where the position it's not entirely clear. Like okay, let's say Chaska is 4 inches away from a model he wants to go and hit, and he moves 5 inches. So really, he's got like 1 to 2 inches of leeway about exactly where he wants to position himself within melee range of the target, right?
Hmm.
So in that circumstance, that's where you start thinking about things like rough ground. Like you'd be like, okay, well, I know I'm gonna hit this person regardless.
Ceteris paribus, I'll go ahead and put myself in the rough
Yeah,
ground,
you
right?
might as well
I'm
optimize it in that way.
Yeah.
And I think that if you played a lot of hunters games, that would be the type of thing that becomes sort of second nature. Like that's the type of instinct that you want to drill into yourself. Is just like,
Right,
oh,
like I'm playing Fathom, I put her by terrain so I can heroic her, right? Like
yeah,
that's just a thing I learned to do. Mist likes cover, got it.
yeah, exactly. And you're right. There is hunters have an above average amount of that because they really are supposed to be like terrain based players. And I don't think they've ever gotten to the point where like you actually are changing your draft or like your kick receive choice or something based only on those rules. But there are games where they have a lot of impact. So yeah.
It's just weird to me that they don't have like I mean there's no game plan that says this fast ground is rough ground. There is one that does the opposite. There's no game plan that's like you
Mm-hmm.
can't use gliding this turn. There's a game plan that says you can glide, right? And I get
Yeah.
it because you want the game plans to create enough dynamism in the turn where something unpredictable happened because you've changed a threat range. And making something unpredictable happen as opposed to making something not happen, which is what making slowing a model down would do, is less exciting and less dynamic. So like why would you do it?
Yeah.
But there's no way for them to like spawn rough ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Theron makes
He makes a
a
forest, so that is rough
forest.
ground,
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah, it's very few and far between. I think probably the Guild Ball designers at some point a couple years into their game identified the fact that the game already sort of facilitates the kind of denial that you're talking about without explicitly putting it in. And like for example, killing activations is one of the ways that that's the case, right? Like
Hmm.
well, I think they sort of started prioritizing global rules like plan cards that added things to the game rather than subtracting them.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. That's where that's kind of what I'm.
yeah.
It's a more elegant way to say what I was trying to say, which is like you want to increase the possibility space, not decrease it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more confused as to why they don't have like things where the hunters. I guess Theron's rule just does it, and you have to be playing the captain for that to matter. And I guess you can read all of the rough ground meme text as like master apprentice Theron text. But I
Mm-hmm.
was more curious why they didn't have like more like one-sided rough ground, right? Where I'm
Yeah.
going to play this and it counts as rough ground for me, but doesn't deprive you of the thing. I guess like a hunter's blind, so to speak, right?
Yeah, it would be cool
Uh,
to have like an ent that had a forest aura or something like that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, like where's that? Like
Yeah.
the in the way that like Granite has rough ground aura, instead give me a rough ground aura, but it's only friendlies feel it instead of only enemies feel it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In
Yeah.
sort of a passive ebb kind of way, it would be cool if it's like people who start their activation in here consider the entire pitch rough train or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that makes sense. That would be cool.
Well, uh, ending on complete fanciful nonsense. This was dope. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope this is
I feel like
still being useful.
oh for sure. Especially this session was more. I have absolutely no like I have no games under my belt with these guilds,
Mm.
and I have no idea how they play because all the information I got about them was from historical articles. Like
Right.
a lot of what was existed about hunters is just like back when the bear was joking, like a huge nonsense
Yeah.
bleeding machine gun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I read about the Kodiak drift, but I never saw what it was. And
Mm.
learning about like how the engineers play, like I thought they were a 3-0 guild because when you read them with naive design eyes, you look at the four kick, you look at all the close control, you look at like velocity, and all of that reads like a 3-0 guild. And then it's like, oh, actually they're durable. Actually, they want to uh, have a dynamic like flexible game plan where they sometimes fight and they sometimes score. So
Mm.
yeah, hugely valuable. This continues to be uh, very very educational. And as soon as I actually play games again with this, I can pass this on to the people who are interested in various guilds and they can actually play them now.
Totally. Yeah. That,
So
that sounds awesome. Great. And yeah, let me
I
know
feel like
when you get some more games in. I'd be curious to hear how they went, or if you have any questions about specific things that happened. Obviously, I'd be happy to talk about that too.
yeah, for like right now, it's like, if I asked you about specific games, it's like, well, you shouldn't have done this whole thing. Like your draft choice was wrong and your strategy was lamentable. But when I actually get interesting situations, I'll bring it up for sure. But right now, I haven't been able to get any games in because most of my friends are switching to Destiny because there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in the new season. They're excited.
Oh, word, word. Cool.
Uh, but yeah, I feel like next time we'll be able to get through the rest of them, and then maybe have time to go over like the 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 Dunning Kruger problem is that I think I know the basics, and I just might not. And so at some point, going through and saying like, what do I know about kicking? What do I know about setups? What do I know about like how to activate might be worth it. But
Mm.
what I came into this wanting to know was how each guild plays and how each guild constructs a roster and what each model does. And that's what I'm getting, and it's totally awesome. And then I'll go bug people about hunters after this. So
Word, cool. And for what it's worth, I mean, just based on the questions you're asking, I'm fairly confident you at least understand the basics. I don't think I'm not getting the impression that you're like playing some mystery game that's not actually Guild Ball or something like that.
okay,
So
okay, good. Like the thing is, I didn't think so either. But like, look at how I would figure that out, right? Like you can only
yeah,
figure that out by playing someone who actually knows. So
yeah,
that's always the danger. Well, all right, man. I will leave you to your evening. Thanks for the bonus hour, and we'll close it up next time.
Okay, great. Thanks, man. See ya. I was gonna say goodbye to the viewers, but there's only one viewer. It's probably Nate. So bye, Nate.